I believe in redemption and I believe in rehabilitation. But do I believe that a former neo-Nazi activist with convictions including the harassment of a Jewish MP should be able to stand as a Conservative candidate for a local election in Somerset?
Josh is someone who actually has been certified by the Home Office to train police officers on anti-Semitism and on countering extremism. Yes, he is somebody who had been previously convicted, but he is someone who has shown contrition for his crimes, has been rehabilitated, and is spending every day working.
Well, there you go. This is GB News Originals. I'm Emily Carver. Please do give this video a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. And do leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Do you think
to solve the very problem which he knew he had caused previously? He's going up and down the country training people, and the Conservative Party believes in second chances. This is not just someone that we've picked up who's a convicted criminal. This is somebody who is actively working to help communities, especially Jewish communities.
There is a character called Joshua Bonehill Payne who was very active online, is due to stand for election to Somerset Council next year. He has previously described himself as a nationalist, fascist theorist and supporter of white rights. He has a conviction for assaulting a police officer and burglary of a police station, and he was convicted in 2014 of malicious communications over an anti-Islam hoax that led to death threats against the owners of a pub in Leicester. He was jailed in 2015 for more than 3 years after posting vile anti-Semitic material online before a planned neo-Nazi rally. In 2016, he was found guilty of racially aggravated harassment over posts directed at the then Labour MP Luciana Berger, who is Jewish. He called her and I'm quoting now, he called her a rodent and an evil money grabber. He told The Guardian his convictions had been spent and that he had various Home Office counter-extremism certifications, and that he'd spoken alongside MPs about his past and highlighted anti-Semitism faced by Britain's Jewish community. Reform UK said last night, Kemi claims to support the fight against anti-Semitism, yet selects a convicted anti-Semite Nazi as a candidate. Kemi Badenoch's Conservative Party has recently told Grant Shapps that he's not allowed to run as a candidate. That's Grant Shapps, former Tory party chairman. Not allowed to run for the Tories under Kemi Badenoch's glorious rule. Joshua Bonehill Payne, a former neo-Nazi activist with convictions including the harassment of a Jewish MP, he can. I really want you to think about this. I want you to think about rehabilitation. I want you to think about redemption. I want you to think about second chances. And I want you to think about something I said to you last week. The fact that that old adage about a leopard being unable to change its spots is untrue. I mean, it's technically true if you're a leopard. But I don't think there's much point being alive if you don't try to be better, if you don't try to change. This might be a consequence of my Catholic upbringing, but you can arrive at the same conclusion via completely different routes. What's the point of doing anything if you're not trying to be better? And by being better, you usually end up happier. But that's not the point. A leopard can change its spots. I want you to think about all of that as I read you a statement from a Conservative Party spokesman. Mr. Bonehill Payne's past actions were indefensible. He was rightly punished and served his sentence. Mr. Bonehill Payne has explained that he has sought to make amends through counter-extremism work. The Conservative Party believes in rehabilitation and that people can change, but all members must adhere to our code of conduct and our values. Ultimately, the decision to elect him will be one for the public. Wasn't she absolutely on her high horse about Louise Haig's spent conviction for not reporting that she'd found a phone that she'd reported as stolen? I'm pretty sure she was. I mean, listen, maybe there's a universe in which not telling the police that you'd found a phone that you'd previously reported, that you thought had been stolen and or maybe she told more egregious lies, but they weren't proved and she wasn't found guilty of that. Maybe that's worse in some ways than being a former neo-Nazi activist with convictions including the harassment of a Jewish MP. Or maybe being a Conservative candidate for a local election in Somerset is not comparable to being an MP.
If we as a society don't believe in redemption and the possibility of changing the nature of a person, why do we have prisons? You might just as well execute everybungent.
I think you might be right. I think you might be right. There's is it Matthew at Hope Not Hate? One of the people at Hope Not Hate had some fairly pungent far-right associations back in the day. He's written in incredibly powerfully about how he's seen the light.
A convicted former neo-Nazi troll was handed a seat inside the Conservative Party's inner workings on tackling extremism, and the fallout has been immediate, furious, and revealing about exactly who gets a second chance in British politics. Right, before we get into this one, if you're new here, welcome to Britain Underneath, the channel that goes past the press releases and actually tells you what's happening beneath the surface of Westminster. If that sounds like your kind of thing, hit subscribe now, because what I'm about to lay out for you is one of those stories that tells you everything about how power really works in this country. Let's dive in. So here's the setup. A man who spent years as one of the internet's most notorious anti-Semitic trolls, someone who did actual prison time for racially aggravated harassment of a Jewish member of the House of Lords, and who separately served time over a grotesque advert promoting a neo-Nazi rally using imagery tied to Auschwitz. This same man was selected by the Conservative Party to stand as a council candidate in Somerset, not decades ago, for next year's local elections. Now, you'd think that alone would be the headline, but it's what happened next that really exposes the machinery underneath British politics. Because when the backlash landed, and it landed hard, from Jewish community organisations, from opposition politicians, from people across the political spectrum, the candidate didn't just quietly step back and disappear. He withdrew from the council race, but he didn't leave. He was offered something else entirely, a role advising the Conservative Party's own Culture and Integration Commission, specifically on the subject of how young men become radicalised. Let that sit for a second. The man steps down from a local council seat under pressure, and in the same breath, the party leader hands him a seat at the table on national policy about extremism. That's not a resignation, that's a reassignment. If you're finding this as revealing as I am, now's a good moment to hit that subscribe button, because Britain Underneath exists to join these dots before anyone else does. Here's what makes this story so uncomfortable. The Conservative leader defended the decision by saying the party needed people who'd been part of the problem to help be part of the solution. The logic being that lived experience of radicalisation is valuable when trying to prevent it in others. On paper, that's not a completely mad argument. Rehabilitation exists, people do change. But the optics here are brutal, and the timing could not have looked worse. This wasn't a private hire made quietly to draw on someone's insight behind closed doors. This was a public council candidacy that only got walked back once the backlash became too loud to survive. And the consolation prize was influence over policy that affects the entire country, not just one ward in Somerset. And the individual at the centre of this didn't exactly help his own case. In stepping back from the council race, he framed his withdrawal not as an admission that the selection was wrong, but as a strategic decision, implying that opposition parties would spend the campaign focused on his past rather than the work he claims to be doing now. That's a very particular kind of framing. It doesn't say, I understand why people are angry. It says, other people are the problem for bringing this up. This is the bit where I want you to actually pause and think, because it's easy to scroll past stories like this. But stay with me, because the reaction from other parties was just as telling as the decision itself. Reform UK didn't hold back, calling the appointment alarming and pointing out, accurately, that someone convicted over the publication of anti-Semitic material would now have influence over party policy at a national level. When Reform UK is the party accusing you of a lapse in judgment on extremism, that should tell you something about how far outside normal political boundaries this decision sits. Meanwhile, the Board of Deputies of British Jews and the Jewish Leadership Council both pushed back hard, calling on the party to change course entirely. And one particularly pointed criticism came from the very peer who was targeted by this individual's original harassment campaign, who said plainly that he should have no role in public life whatsoever. not just because of the anti-Semitism, but because of his broader record and attitudes as well. If you're still with me, that tells me you actually care about what's happening underneath the headlines in this country, not just the headlines themselves. So do me a favour and hit subscribe if you haven't already. It genuinely helps this channel keep doing these deep dives. Now, here's the real question this story raises, and it's bigger than one candidate in one council seat. Where exactly is the line between rehabilitation and rebranding? Political parties love to talk about giving people a second chance, about redemption, about growth. And sure, in principle, nobody should be permanently defined by things they did in their 20s. But there's a difference between quietly earning trust back over years through demonstrated change and being handed a formal advisory role on national extremism policy the moment your public candidacy becomes a liability. One of those is rehabilitation. The other looks a lot more like damage control, dressed up as redemption. And that's really what this story is about. It's not really about one troll, one council seat, or even one party leader's judgment call. It's about how easily political institutions can turn embarrassing headlines into strategic reassignments, how quickly stepping down can quietly become stepping sideways, and how much scrutiny actually gets applied before someone with this kind of history is handed influence over policy that shapes how young people across Britain are protected, or not, from radicalisation. Take a breath after that one, because it's a lot to sit with. But this is exactly the kind of story that gets buried under the next day's news cycle unless people keep talking about it. So stay informed, keep asking who's really benefiting from decisions like this, and keep questioning the space between what a party says it stands for and what it actually does when nobody's watching closely enough. If this kind of story matters to you, if you want the version of British politics that doesn't get sanitised for a press release, then Britain Underneath is exactly where you need to be. Subscribe now, because there is always more happening beneath the surface than anyone in Westminster wants you to see, and I'll be right here bringing it to you every single time. See you in the next one.